And away we go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world today. This is Coffee Talk, podcasting and broadcasting out of Atlanta, double secret location in double secret probation, not in Atlanta, but nearby, anyways. As we get ready to talk about the news, Coffee Talk Live. And of course, that is at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube and Prepper University on YouTube, or at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, or Coffee Talk on Fistful of Radio. That is fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. And of course, as always, I will try to read through as many of the comments in the live portion from YouTube as I reasonably can for those of you who are listening and not watching, so that you can keep up with the conversation. And we have a few people who have chimed in here thus far. I see Helter is there. I see Delo. I see Dragon, as people are starting to chime in on the YouTube portion of the discussion as we get ready to talk about, yes, the news at large, the news in the world, what's going on in the world today. I don't know, do you? Too much of one thing and not enough of the other. But one thing you can never have too much of is cats. For those of you who can see, there is Dusty. Dusty joining us today. Hello, Dusty, keeping me company. Boogers has joined us. And of course, some of you can't see what's going on and you're only listening and you don't realize I'm talking to a cat. I'm surrounded by cats, and this is one of them, one of the adopted strays, Dusty, keeping me company for the day, or for the moment anyways, until she gets bored and wanders off. Very, very friendly feline. And we'll dive into the news here in a moment, give people a chance to get in. I see H12 is here. Thanks for joining us today. Give people a chance to join in on the live portion, and then we'll read off snippets from the daily news. What is pertinent in your world? Well, not so much a matter of what's pertinent in the world as what's being forced on you by the world or by the governments of the world, because mostly it's not the people. In a lot of instances, it's the governments and what they do and what they force people to do and what they brainwash people to do, because people are not that smart. Something I've talked about many, many times. Most people, they're not that bright, unfortunately. And you'll see some demonstrations of that today with some of the things that I have selected out for talking about in today's news broadcast. What do you think, Dusty? You think that's a good idea? Dusty, as she settles in, and we'll go ahead and get started. I see Preparedness Veteran has joined us. Thanks for popping in here today. We get ready to talk about this. And this is a great example as I get this first bit fired up, if it ever opens. It's being a little sluggish today. And I always wonder about that because I am hardwired. I'm not using Wi-Fi. So that should not really happen unless you're being interfered with by the powers that be. And I know the bots like to pick my channel apart. Now, this is a great example of what you call so-called modern journalism, because this story and this particular thing I'm going to read is from the Wall Street Journal, and I'll read the cover. It says, Israel-Hamas war, Biden condemns blast at hospital compound, departs Israel without meeting Arab leaders. Now, this was initially reported very irresponsibly because the media jumped on it very quickly and blamed Israel for a hospital blast. It has hence been confirmed that they really didn't have anything to do with it. And now all of the major news outlets have been forced to retract their statements. They've been forced to retract the statements now. Everybody who jumped on board with this, ABC, NBC, CNN, the New York Times, whoever and whatever, all condemned Israel. And then when they found out what actually happened, because you remember the good old days when the news media would just tell you the facts. In this case, a hospital blew up. Would just tell you the facts, and you would decide how you felt about it. Now they tell you how to feel about it, and you have to decide if it's true or not. And I see the warden has joined us today. Thanks for popping in. I'll go ahead and read through this. U.S. signals intelligence shows Gaza militants are behind the hospital blast. And there you see an aerial shot, a drone shot. It says the U.S. has collected high confidence signal intelligence showing the explosion at the hospital compound in Gaza was caused by the militant group Palestinian Islamic Jihad, U.S. officials have said. The U.S. assessment drew in part on communication interceptions and other intelligence gathered by the U.S., officials said. Our current assessment based on analysis of overhead imagery, intercepts, and open source information is that Israel is not actually responsible for the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, White House National Security Council spokeswoman Adrienne Watson said. And I can't read the rest because they want me to subscribe. What the kind of crap is that, Wall Street Journal? I'm not going to be able to open the rest of the article now. But basically, exactly, they accidentally blew up their own stuff. And the news media automatically assumed it was Israel and ran with it. And now they have to retract it. They have to retract it because that's libel. That's libel. And there you go. And also pay close attention to wording. This is something we talk about a lot, and it came up yesterday. U.S. signals intelligence show Gaza militants behind hospital blast. And then down here, Gaza was caused by the militant group, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Militant group. Not terrorists. Oh no, we can't say that. We got to be careful. They might blow us up. Chris says Biden was falling asleep during the meeting earlier today. I am not surprised. And that's what H12 says. Why am I not surprised? Did he talk about himself? Did he talk about how he saved the world 50 years ago? Chris says Biden can't get up a staircase without using the handrail. He needs to use it. Gary says accidentally or deliberately. They could have deliberately blown it up because they have no regard for their own people. Armand says during war, everyone lies. Hard to know the truth. That's true. Freedom for All says all countries are capable of false flags. H12 says I don't think this was an accident. Chris says I've seen people on hospice who are healthier than Biden. Okay. Armand says at some point truth is irrelevant. Only belief matters. Preparedness veteran says intel disclosure on action will always rely on another alternate source. Looks accurate to me, but there will be doubters, of course. And Helter says those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire, very well put. And then Dragon says Biden makes it clear over and over that he couldn't be less interested in anything other than the power that comes from being president, reading straight from a notepad with slow, boring speech. Yeah, it was pointless. But again, still hasn't made it to the train wreck, still hasn't made it to the border. And he did eventually end up in Maui, but, could barely stay awake and talked about a kitchen fire. He empathizes because of a kitchen fire that burned his house down, which turned out to be a lie. If you recall, the report on that fire was that there was a small kitchen fire. The fire department was there less than 20 minutes. Guy can't tell the truth to save his life. It's incredible. But to me, the two things that I take away from this story are, one, how irresponsible so-called modern journalism is. And two, the wording. Again, they're Gaza militants now. Gaza militants. God forbid you call them what they are. It's easier to deal with a problem if you can call it what it is. It's kind of like when you go to Alcoholics Anonymous and you have to admit that you're an addict in order for it to work. Chris says, did you see the Cornell professor who said watching the Jews getting killed was exhilarating? No, I don't think I saw that one. And Monkey is here. Thanks for joining us. And Johnny Future is here. And H12 says the Palestinians were refusing to let people leave, wanting them to be martyrs. Yeah, because that's part of their MO. That's part of what they do. And again, Chris had brought that up about the Cornell professor. There's a lot of people in the United States who are celebrating and counter protesting, I guess you could call it, for lack of a better description, and going on and on about their support for Palestine, and really have no idea what they're talking about or what they're getting themselves into, and wanting to be on the right side of history and not realizing, again, how foolish they are, because the people in that part of the world, they don't love you. They don't love you. They don't want you. They don't care about you. And you're just as much their enemy as everyone else. I see Ragnar Thorshammer has joined us today. Monkey says, with Biden thing in Maui, imagine what he would have done in a tornado-struck area, relating to the tornado victim as his stuff getting blown away on a very windy day at his Baltimore home. Yeah, I know. Grandma's laundry blowing on the clothesline out back, and sometimes it would land in the mud. I can empathize. Chris says lots of U.S., European, and Israel embassies under attack at the moment, as well as synagogues now. Synagogue got firebombed in Berlin. Nature Nerd says just evil Nazis coming out of the woodwork. Despicable indeed. As we travel on here, and this ties in with that whole point that I was just making, you want to talk about stupid people again, and this comes from the Washington Examiner. Israel war, the fundamental incoherence of queers for Palestine. I love this. Here's the rally. Look at all these people with Palestinian flags, not a Palestinian among them. Maybe a couple of Middle Eastern people. I do see a couple of women in hijabs, barely. This wouldn't pass in the Middle East, only in America, which is why they don't take westernized Muslim people seriously. As I've stated before, and I know it sounds offensive, but bow ties and bean pies don't cut it in the Middle East. Neither does this. Getting into the article, the world is reeling after a horrific attack by Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 people, including 22 Americans in Israel. The numbers are higher than that. But making matters exponentially worse is the incoherent and downright vile response to this tragedy from many progressives in the United States. In Times Square, progressives gathered to celebrate the so-called freedom fighters and their acts of indiscriminate violence against civilians at college campuses across the U.S. Pro-Palestine rallies have erupted that have quickly given way to open calls for violence against Israel and celebration of the Hamas attacks. Across social media platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, supposedly progressive voices have justified, made excuses for, or even celebrated Hamas's horrific violence, which includes the mass slaughter of concert goers and killing babies. And by the way, a point I want to make about that, the concert goers, that is in a very progressive area and was a gun-free zone where a lot of liberals are, a lot of people like this. Israel is probably the only place in the Middle East where alphabet AG, LGB, gay people can protest or wave a flag. Think about that. Thankfully, many liberals have not succumbed to this madness. I don't know about that. But those who have demonstrate the brain rot of the woke progressive worldview. It simplifies the world into oppressors versus oppressed in a way that's reductive and inaccurate, which leads them to a place of fundamental incoherence. Now, here's the flag at the front of this march. I don't see any Middle Eastern people, but here you go. Queers for Palestine, Queer Action Collective, Queer Action Collective, excuse me. And this is what I mean about how people are just stupid. These are your sheep, everybody. And I'm going to get into this because, something's coming to mind looking at this, and I'm going to share it with you here in a moment. Let me catch up a couple more of these comments. H12 says, remind me again why we wanted to be friends with those people. I didn't. Stacy Lynn is here. Thank you for joining us today. Chris says, I'm not old enough to have lived during Jimmy Carter's hostage crisis, but this seems similar. I was. All people is here. Monkey says FBI should treat those progressives that cheered on Hamas at the Palestinians rally as that of the ones on January 6th. You know what it makes me think of? We're setting ourselves up for another round of the McCarthy hearings for people who went to communists rallies in the 50s. And Trump is just the guy to do it because he's already said that he wants to go after these people. H12 says, oh, he's talking to Chris. Hold on. Helter says there's no middle ground allowed in the debate. It's all emotion and tribalism. People are forced to pick a team and support everything the team is doing, or all sides turn on them. And Chris says lots of white leftists at the rallies. Indeed. And Urban is here. Urban Angst has joined us, as well as Gary Edwards. And H12 says, at least it seems like it to me. Now, this is what it makes me think of. Now, you've heard me. I said it over and over again, and I brought it up like 2-3 times already. People are not that smart. They're not. Most people are downright morons. They're stupid. Okay? And they're so stupid, in fact, that you almost are waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for something horrible to happen to these people because it seems like they freaking deserve it. And people like this are easily taken advantage of by clever individuals, politicians and others, politicians, activists, whoever, corporations. Look at these people and see them as sheep, and they want to shear them. They want to shave them down. They're like, yeah, I can use these people for something. I can screw them out of donations. I can screw them out of backing a cause that they don't understand. I can do something to these people. I can manipulate them. Okay. And it makes me think of The Magnificent Seven. Who's seen the film The Magnificent Seven? Yul Brynner and I think Charles Bronson was in it. It was all-star cast, The Magnificent Seven. Good Western movie. There's a lot of great Western movies that came out of the 1970s, including The Magnificent Seven. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Once Upon a Time in the West. A lot of great spaghetti westerns from that time period that have not been surpassed in the modern era. But to the point, The Magnificent Seven, and I'm thinking of Eli Wallace's character. Eli Wallace, you might remember him as the Ugly from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. He played the lead bandito in The Magnificent Seven. And for those of you who never saw it, The Three Amigos with Steve Martin and Martin Short and Chevy Chase is a comedic rewrite of The Magnificent Seven. So it's the same concept. But anyways, Eli Wallace's character, he rides into town and he's confronted. And he's talking about the villagers. They said, what about the people? And Eli says, what about the people? If God had not meant for them to be sheared, he would not have made them sheep. That really resonates. Probably the best line in the film, honestly. Here is a guy in a position of power who looks at the people, sees a bunch of weak morons who are cowards, who grovel and cower, don't even try to defend themselves. Even at this point, you hired gunmen. You're still not willing to defend yourself because that's what the Magnificent Seven were there for. Why shouldn't I take advantage of them? Why not? When they give me what I want, I'll go away. And that's how politicians and activists and media giants and all of these other clever people look at the rest of the world as. You're a bunch of sheep. Why shouldn't I shear you? Why shouldn't I? Why not? Gary Smith says, for better or worse, McCarthy had a point, though his methods sucked. Yeah, and they went after a lot of the wrong people, Gary, because anybody who attended a rally was a target, and a lot of people who never did were also targets because they would go easy on you if you named somebody, and a lot of times people would just throw somebody under the bus who had nothing to do with communism. But yeah, he did that all wrong. But he had a point. I agree. Urban says when one side is attacking small civilian villages and youth rave concerts, there's no neutrality. I know. Catching up a few more comments. I'm sure they're backed up here now. Paul Burke says they would throw them off a building if they went there. Correct. Maybe that's the point. Maybe they figure, oh, well, if we demonstrate and show them how much we just love them and are willing to turn the other cheek, which, by the way, turn the other cheek is an interpretation of knowing when the hell to walk away too, not just to let yourself continue to be abused. that somehow it's going to change their hearts. No, they will chop your feet off and burn you at the stake, or something equally as horrible. Chris says, I think it's only a matter of time before a big terror attack in America. Wouldn't surprise me. There's enough of them here. H12 says, lots of potential Darwin Awards. Indeed. And Preparedness says, seems to be a lot of sympathy for Palestinians due to the growth of the Israeli borders, i.e. Palestinians evicted to make way for the Israelis. They weren't really, though. Because remember, the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians, because they're not really Palestinians, didn't show up there until long after. Remember, Israel's been established like 3 times in the 20th century, all before twice before World War II by the British Empire, and once after, if I remember correctly. And they kept having to give away land, give away land. There was no one out there where they were, and then suddenly everybody shows up because Israel's there and causes trouble. And it was all the British could do to nullify the situation. These Palestinian people, nobody wants them. They're refugees from all over the Middle East who came there to cause problems. And Israel has continued to pander and surrender as they become more westernized and been pushed by the UN and everybody else to have the two-state solution and here, sign this document. And it doesn't work. It doesn't freaking work. As we continue on here, Nature Nerd says, sad how gays don't realize that not flooding the West with Islam refugees is protecting them and their rights. No, they don't see it, and they never will. Cruising says, great movie. The remake even wasn't bad. And Gary Edwards says, Robert Vaughn, Steve McQueen, and Seven Samurai. El Guapo lives, Ragnar says. Urban says, if ever there was proof of the Westerners have no idea what's coming their way, it's the existence of groups like Queers for Palestine. It's both frightening and hilarious at the same time, not good. And the problem is, again, you sit there and you look at it and you're like, wow, what a bunch of morons. Whatever happens to them, they deserve it. But the problem with that is that, again, analogy of a sinking ship. When the ship goes under, anything close to it will get sucked into the undertow with it. It's hard to escape. Gary says it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. That is true. As I try to catch up, Gary says people are in many ways sheep. It's who you get as a shepherd that makes a big difference. Fair enough. Armand says the Gaza conflict has spilled over into the corporate workspace. Corporate leaders of a certain tribe want to blacklist people based on their views of the conflict. Armand says this is incredibly un-American and another sign the country is crumbling. Crumbling? I think it's already gone. Chris said Islam is not part of civilized society. And Cruising said Sam Harris nailed it at the end of faith. In End of Faith back in 2005, Israel has had the means to annihilate the Palestinians for decades and chooses not to. The other side declares they'll kill Israelis to the last man. And one more, and we'll move on. One more comment here. Chris says many of these rallies are chanting about intifada, which is uprising, and chanting glory to the murderers. Indeed. But, don't worry about it because Biden's on it. Biden's going to help. Sweet old Uncle Joe is going to take care of everything. And how's he going to do it? How do you think he's going to do it, folks? He's going to throw money at the problem. Because that's what politicians do. Your hard-earned tax dollars at work, ladies and gentlemen. And this comes from ABC News. It says Biden drafts $100 billion foreign aid package, including money for Israel and the Ukraine. Of course, because you may have forgotten the Ukraine. The whole world forgot that anything was going on in the Ukraine. And Biden remembered. Pepperidge Farm remembers, and so does Biden. Who remembers Pepperidge Farm? They're still out there. They still manufacture the stuff, but they just don't do those commercials anymore. Hitting the article, the Biden administration is drafting a $100 billion foreign aid package that includes assistance for Israel as well as other top security priorities, according to 2 people familiar with the details. Details on the spending request were still being finalized ahead of an official request sent by the White House to Congress this week. I want to know how much is going where. One person told ABC News that if the bulk of the assistance will likely go to the Ukraine, there you are. While others also said that it included $10 billion for Israel. The officials spoke on condition of anonymity in order to discuss details that hadn't been announced yet by the White House. So $90 billion for the Ukraine and 10 for Israel, huh? Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for that. Because, I was worried about how my tax dollars were being spent. The request comes as President Joe Biden travels to Israel in a show of unity with the Jewish state following the brutal October 7th attack on civilians by Hamas terrorists from Gaza. Oh, they called them terrorists. Who is this? ABC News? Oh my goodness, that is the first time that I haven't seen either Hamas fighters or Hamas militants or Gaza militants or something like that. They actually called them terrorists. I am taken aback. Back to the article. On Capitol Hill, Senate leaders suggested Tuesday that such a sweeping aid package would find support among lawmakers. So much for the near shutdown that we just had, right? So much for that. We'd like to get the supplemental package moved as quickly as possible because the needs are great in both Israel and the Ukraine, said Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York. Republican leader Mitch McConnell said he would support bundling aid for Ukraine and Israel, and that he expects the administration to include money for border security too. Really? The border part of it needs to be credible, not just some reference to it, but a credible deal, he told reporters. Bloomberg was first to report the $100 billion total. The aid proposal for Israel follows extensive discussions between the two countries, with Israel appearing to opt, at least for now, against a massive ground invasion of Gaza, even as international groups accuse Israel of worsening a humanitarian crisis by not allowing food or water into Gaza and cutting off electricity. Stop right there. I'm going to stop it right there because I'm going to say something about that. It was a proposal put by, not that I trust them, but the UN had a humanitarian intervention package on the table for Gaza. They said, we want to go into Gaza. We want to move, we want to clean things up. We want to pull out wounded people, whatever. And the USA vetoed it. So don't tell me you want to help now. Just saying. Let me catch up a couple more of these comments here. Chris wants to know if we have 34 trillion in debt yet. Any second now. Johnny says the answer to any problem is to, number one, throw money at it, and two, raise your taxes to pay for the throwing. Indeed. And Gary Smith says Joe's handlers will throw money at people. Joe himself will take a nap. Urban said Israel is the only country in the world that is not allowed to win wars according to the UN and their ilk. There we go. Preparedness says watch oil prices rise. Any excuse? Armored says ice cream calms down dementia patients, and that's why Joe always has ice cream. Nature Nerd says another 90 billion for the Ukraine after we just spent 200 billion ? Yes, I'm afraid so, apparently. And then they're telling us, oh, there's a government shutdown and the government's broke and we have record debt and all the rest of it. Give me a break. Give me a break. It's absolutely sickening, especially knowing I'm paying for it, that, my fellow countrymen are paying for this out of their taxes by force. It's not like we have a choice. Fluke Man made it. Thanks for joining us, Fluke Man. Chris says gas is going to be $7 a gallon. It already is in California. Dragon says all of our politicians are owned by the military-industrial complex and none actually care about us. They will all lie to our faces, so we hear what they want us to hear. And Armid says the IDF might be powerful for its size, but they lack quantity. Better 50 lions than 100 sheep. Helter says it seems like Israel's economy is doing well enough that it should not need financial assistance from the U.S. year after year. And Monkey says, and we wonder why people are getting tired of these wars, just wasting money, or as I like to call it, putting them on life support. And another one here from Nature Nerd. He says Gaza was stupid to attack Israel if they can simply just cut all their utilities. They don't think far enough ahead. Well, they were goaded into it. And, you've already heard me, I'm sure most of you have heard me make the analogy that I compare what's going on there with the Palestinians and Hamas to the Viet Cong during the Vietnam War, because the North Koreans, used and abused their authority over the Viet Cong, convincing them to basically whittle themselves down to the last man until there was none left, especially during the Tet Offensive, where nearly 50,000 of them died in a single night in futile attacks on well-protected U.S. military bases. So I kind of see Hamas like that. It's like the other countries that are involved want to see Hamas wear themselves completely out till there's nothing left. And then they'll decide, okay, is Israel weakened enough that we can get involved now that Hamas is spent? I wouldn't be surprised at all. All People says the Israel World Aid Pack is just more money laundering for the military-industrial complex. And Flukeman says, wonder if the lawmakers actually pay their fair share of taxes. Well, they make enough that they can afford it. I don't know about the rest of us. And Armin says, California utility workers now wear bulletproof vests. And ain't that a damn shame? Isn't it, though? And again, these people, they're already in our country. They're already here. They're already in everybody's Western country. And we have to face it. And we've been seeing this. France, they had to shut down all their airports and screen them because there were bomb threats. In Belgium, firebombing at a synagogue. And now Belgium is in these countries now are reevaluating their extremely weak laws concerning migration. And you see here, AFP, Belgium, Sweden want tougher powers to expel irregular migrants. Again, pay a close attention to the wording. Irregular migrants. How about illegal aliens? How about illegal aliens that might be a terroristic threat? Because they are. The Belgian and Swedish prime ministers on Wednesday called for better border controls and more coordinated powers in the European Union to expel irregular migrants after an attack in Brussels left 2 people dead. It's a little late for that now. They've been pouring into your country since 2015. There's hundreds of thousands of them. What the hell do you think you're going to do? Unless you're just going to throw everybody out who doesn't have citizenship, send them back where they came from. It'd be cheaper than dealing with them. Belgium and Sweden were left reeling this week after a Tunisian who was staying illegally in Belgium after his asylum claim was refused. We talked about that the other day. Gunned down 2 Swedish football fans and injured a third on Monday in central Brussels. The man was identified in media reports as 45-year-old Tunisian migrant Abdesalam Al-Lessoud. Belgian police shot him dead on Tuesday. Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo and Swedish Premier Ulf Kristersson played tribute to the 2 Swedes by placing wreaths in a Swedish football scarf and shirt at the site where they were killed. Gee, isn't that nice? That helps so much. It's a photo op. It's a photo op, you frauds. Oh, excuse me. Kristersson thanked De Croo for his support, while the Belgian premier vowed Sweden can always count on us during a press conference in front of the building where the attack happened. Are you going to throw all these people out? Are you? The 2 leaders also urged coordinated migrant return policies in the European Union, and the bloc is currently working on an overhaul of Europe's migration rules. The attack brought greater urgency to the issue after it came to light that the gunman had applied for asylum in Belgium in 2019 but had been refused in 2020. Authorities tried to track him down to issue him with a demand to leave, but he could not be located. They could have found him if they really wanted to, and you're going to give him a piece of paper that says, we demand you leave, but are you going to throw him out? The answer to that is no, obviously, or else this wouldn't be going on. Unbelievable. Dragon says it's amazing how 100 billion can magically appear for a war effort, but for anything that would directly help Americans, sorry, we don't have the money for that. Indeed. Absolutely. And that's my point. Again, we're running all over the world, helping everybody with all their damn problems, and we can't take care of ourselves. Or rather, the government is misusing our money and isn't putting it where they claim they're going to, as far as, infrastructure and, oh man, I could go on and on. You already know. there's so much that needs to be done in this country. Border security, roads, railroad problems. The cities are falling apart and they're throwing money all over the world, but they don't fix anything here. Urban says the most neglected story is the harrowing story of the Israeli hostages. The official number is now 199. The number grows as Hamas produced videos and are released by the terrorists. And Chris says the religion of peace added again. Indeed. Urban says, I have not heard a single pro-Palestinian organization call for the immediate release of all Israeli hostages. They're not going to. They're not going to. And then you got idiots chiming in on it too, like, is it Ron DeSantis? Oh, no, all Palestinians are not anti-Semitic. Have you been down there? Are you kidding me? Are you serious? Yes, the hell they are. Unless there's some, like, weak-kneed Americanized one that was born in this country. Seriously. Or Alicia Keys now. Why are you chiming in on it? Alicia Keys got in trouble for making pro-Palestinian remarks recently and took her posts down. Can't you just sing? Shut up and freaking sing. Preparedness says, these people will never leave. We're stuck with a huge problem. They have to be forced out. Monkey said, and yet there's still people who will vote against what they want, and it keeps getting worse and worse. Chris said Sweden, Belgium, France, Germany, United Kingdom, America, and Canada have a rough road ahead after bringing in millions of people who justify suicide bombing, and others, Spain, Australia, New Zealand. Pick your Western country. H12 says there's a big I told you so in there somewhere. Yeah, there is. And it's going to get worse. It's going to continue to happen. Chris said if the hostages aren't dead already, they'll likely be captive for years. That could happen. That could happen. Preparedness says an illegal was caught this week trying to make a chemical weapon. And Gary Edwards says Islamic refugees are imported into Europe in order to create artificial chaos, which will pave the way for a one world government. Yeah, it may not be a government they can handle. They think they're going to get a handle on this after the fact. Those people will never cooperate. Armin says Greater Idaho Project might be an American analog of Donbass leaving Ukraine. As I wrap up a few more of these, Fluke Man says, obviously, the U.S. government has billions or possibly even trillions stored for emergency purposes, but not for their own people. Hopefully, Trump will be the next president and change all that. And Chris says Alicia Keys is married to Swiss Beats, who is a hardcore Muslim. Well, that answers that. But I mean, she very likely could have ended her career with whatever it is that she said. I didn't read the whole thing, but I know that she's under fire for her remarks. Hell, just stay neutral. Just freaking sing. A lot of these celebrities, I don't know what the hell they're thinking. Dragon says this is the result of multiculturalism. Sweden and the rest of Western Europe need to realize they have to put a stop to immigration of non-Western immigrants. And I agree. But speaking of open border policies, we may as well jump to Illinois. I think this is Illinois, right? Let's see. And this is from Wealthy Living. Wealthy Living produced this article. Our borders are wide open. Illinois governor diverts rental assistance funds to migrant care, sparking outrage. So, yeah, we're going to take money from your tax dollars that has been allocated to rental assistance, and we're going to spend it on a different program now. And still expect more taxes from you to replace the money that we borrowed. Something that Illinois often does. You've heard me talk about when they were shut down by the Lottery Commission before, because they were cross borrowing between different divisions of government and lost track of the money. Article says Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's decision to divert rental assistance funding to help pay for migrant care has sparked controversy and raised concerns among lawmakers and citizens. This move comes in response to the significant influx of non-citizen arrivals in Chicago after crossing the U.S. southern border. Send them back. Chicago has become the epicenter of the migration challenge, with over 15,000 non-citizen arrivals finding their way into the city. It's more than that. The sudden increase in population has placed a considerable strain on the city and state resources. One example of diverted funds is the rental assistance program, originally intended to support legal residents facing housing challenges. This program has been uh, reallocated to address the needs of asylum seekers and migrants. Now, what this program is, I know what this program is because, again, I was in Illinois and I've seen it. Basically, it's like you're working, you get hit with a financial hardship, um, and there's programs where you can go and say, hey, I need help with a month's rent, I need help with a month's mortgage, and they will do that for you. They'll pay like a 1 month's rent or something like that, just to try to get you back to square one. So they're taking money from that program and putting it into their migrant programs. Quote, we have provided some of that rental assistance money, which wasn't originally intended to be about asylum seekers for this challenge, said Governor Pritzker in response to the question of how the state plans to keep funding available for new arrivals. Despite a balanced state budget, no surplus funds are available, leading to a need to divert taxpayer funds from other programs. I very seriously doubt that the budget, the state budget in Illinois, has been balanced for more than a century. I really don't believe it. The city and state of Illinois have already expended hundreds of millions of dollars to provide care and support for the incoming migrants, further exacerbating the financial strain. State Representative David Fress, a Republican from Red Bud, has expressed strong opposition to the plan. I don't blame him. I do not blame him for, excuse me, for trying to resist that. DIY says, do you think being addiction free is a big plus in SHTF? Absolutely, it is. If you're addiction free, then you have one less thing to worry about, because some people, especially if they are addicted to something that has a strong pull, like alcohol or narcotics, it'll eat them up. And in some cases, the DTs for certain types of narcotics and even severe alcoholism can be so severe it can cause you to have a stroke or a heart attack. You can drop dead from it. So yeah, absolutely. Also, it keep you from these people tend to be really unhealthy, and it'd keep you from getting yourself killed early, because you'll be running around like crazy trying to steal or molest people all over the place, attacking people for whatever you can get. You'll become an easy target. Helter says, some people wonder why East Asian countries refuse to let in immigrants. This is one of the reasons why. They're not wrong for wanting to maintain their homogenous society. Chris says, definitely good to be off medications. He's talking to DIY. Urban says, in Canada, as the border becomes more open, the internet becomes more closed. Interesting how that works, isn't it? And Paul Burke says, America will go to war before there's an election there, so there'll be no elections. And Chris says, all the Democrats in Chicago and New York City are pissed now that the people they voted for are prioritizing illegals. And Arvid says, Canuckstian in Maple Leaf, North Korea, calling illegals who break the law asylum seekers is like calling criminals entrepreneurs. That's a good one, Helter. And Chris says, I've also heard San Diego getting thousands of illegals. They are. They're pouring in. And Paul Burke says, if we owe money, we go to prison. Government doesn't. No. And they can be as irresponsible as they want, and they don't care. It's not their money. It's your money that they're spending. This is like you go into you get your neighbor's debit cards and credit cards and spend their money on something, but somehow get away with it. If you did that in real life, that's identity theft, and you go to prison. Dragon says, our country created this crisis by overthrowing lots of Central and South American governments and sanctioning them to death. These people have no choice but to leave those hellholes that we created. And Chris says, I've heard a lot of websites are blocked in Canada, are blocked by the government, so people are driving into America to see the banned content. I don't know if that's happening, but I do know that they've been blocking the content. I saw an article earlier that was talking about Justin Trudeau, and they were saying that if Trudeau gets elected again, Canada is pretty much finished, that it's already dying, that they've lost their identity, they've lost their freedom. And if he gets elected again, they're pretty much finished. There will be no more Canada. And I'm curious to see how things are going to turn out in their next round of elections. Armored says Justin Castro. He kind of looks like a young Castro, doesn't he? You just give him the little goat beard. He kind of looks like a young Castro, actually. That's interesting. As we move along here, we may as well shuffle our way into California. California trying to take even more of your rights away. And this comes from Buzz Loving. It says California Governor Newsom calls for a constitutional convention on right to safety. We have to push back. Oh, we have to. We have to push back. One more here from Chris. He says, look at the area called Brampton, and much of Montreal and Toronto are all Islamic, Hindu, and Sikh. Getting into our article here. It says, Governor Gavin Newsom and his allies are tackling the gun safety issue. Here we go again. But the problem is that they would have to change the United States Constitution through an amendment that would write a list of gun control policy priorities into federal law. Yeah, that won't happen. Newsom wrote on X, California just became the first state in the nation to officially propose an amendment to the United States Constitution to end our nation's gun violence crisis, he added. No more waiting around for Congress. It's time to act. Yeah, go act somewhere else. The amendment would have, it says Newsom or Nuisance, Governor Nuisance, added the viral changes that were proposed in the Right to Safety Amendment. Number 1, raising the minimum age to purchase a gun to 21. Number 2, universal background checks. We already have that, Nuisance. We already have that. 3, a reasonable waiting period for gun purchases. A reasonable waiting period. There are several places that already do that, and that's a nuisance. If reasonable is a matter of opinion. And 4, banning civilian purchases of assault weapons. What does that mean? How do you define an assault weapon? What do you think an assault weapon is? Most people do not and cannot afford the type of licensing it would take to have a fully automatic weapon. It's expensive, and expect the ATF to harass you for the rest of your life and come around. I know a couple of people that have a license like that. ATF shows up every couple of months to make sure that the guns are still there. Like you're going to go through all that trouble and then sell them under the table. That'll never happen. It says, writing on X, Newsom, who is not running for president and firmly stands behind the Biden administration, I bet he does, explained, when people ask why I am introducing a constitutional amendment on gun safety, this is why. Not only has Congress stalled for years on passing common sense reforms, wording again, common sense reforms. Common sense to who? Judges across the country are tearing down laws that Americans overwhelmingly support, laws that keep us safe and keep guns out of the hands of dangerous criminals, Newsom added. Yeah. So you want to punish law-abiding citizens to keep guns out of the hands of criminals. That always works. That always works. And how do you know Americans overwhelmingly support the things that you are proposing? You did some like hand-picked poll where you cherry-picked individuals who were like really anti-gun and interviewed like maybe 400 of them. The governor declared we have to push back. Newsom's office noted that since early 1990s, California has cut its gun death rate in half, and that the state gun death rate is 43% lower than the rest of the U.S. I wonder if that's true. I wonder how true those statistics actually are. Because I don't believe that. And instead of trying to erase the Second Amendment, Newsom and his allies elaborated, in the face of decades of congressional inaction and unelected judges that are putting Americans in danger, it is time for citizens to stand up for common sense to protect us against the uniquely American epidemic of gun violence. And there that is again with the common sense BS. You know why they say that is so that if you have an opposing viewpoint, they can accuse you of not having any common sense. That's why they word it that way. Well, if you had any common sense, then you would agree, blah, blah, blah. And you might have some really valid points, but then they try to negate it with their wording and their phrasing. As I get back into these comments here, Urban says, if Trudeau gets elected again, will Canadians be allowed to claim refugee status in the United States? But I'm probably too white to qualify. Hey, everybody else does. You may as well come down here. Helter says the U.S. Constitutional Convention is an absolute horrible idea. It could lead to a repeal of any and all individual rights. It will have long-term negative ramifications. Monkey says, yeah, you have to get 66% in Congress, and then you need 75% of the states to agree to adding an amendment. That's why it's not so easy as he tries to pretend it is. Monkey says a belt can be an assault weapon. A fist can be an assault weapon. That term assault weapon is too vague, which is why they use the term. Dragon says this is one of the reasons I don't think Newsom should run for president. He can do certain things in California that might fly there but won't pass muster in the rest of the country. He would be as much of a disaster as Biden or anybody else of their ilk. Dragon says a serious call for a constitutional convention is a can of worms that shouldn't be opened. Chris said, how long has Gavin been governor? Too damn long. California has only gone way downhill under his leadership, where they profit off the homeless. And JD says Newsom doesn't believe for a second that this would ever become an amendment. This is called grandstanding. And All People says the only reason that Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister of Canada is due to votes by the new Canadians, naturalized migrants and non-citizens. And Gary says gun deaths may be lower. How are knife deaths doing? These guys always make it sound like it's only a tragedy if you're killed by a gun. And that's a good point. That's a good point. We don't know. And we don't know if it's even true, because I've seen that thrown out before, and I've challenged that with statistics that were coming out of Georgia. You remember when Stacey Abrams was running for governor. She was running for governor of the state of Georgia, and thank God she lost twice. She had gun statistics that I picked apart in earlier videos, so like a year ago. The gun statistics that they threw out there about the number of children that are killed by guns and so on and so forth in her commercial advertisements that were completely false. And I was able to demonstrate it with state statistics. I was able to pull them up. And we'll go ahead and we'll jump to California's neighbor and see what they're doing. And this is, I believe, King County is in Washington State, isn't it? We'll see here in a moment. It says, this is from the Washington Examiner. King County moves on potential $1 billion property tax hike for climate action. Yeah, that's Washington. That's Washington State. King County voters may see a new climate levy lift on their ballots next year as county officials begin discussions to increase revenue to reduce climate impact efforts. What the hell does that mean? What a word salad that is. The new motion would request King County Executive Dow Constantine to develop funding options to generate $1 billion in funding over a 6 or 9 year period. Funds would be used for greenhouse gas reduction efforts and response to climate impacts. The motion requests that the executive's proposal include a proposed property tax levy lift for voters to decide on in November 2024. They better vote that mess down, as well as policy recommendations for how the money could be allocated among projects in areas including transportation, open space acquisition, and response to climate impacts. According to an estimate from the King County Office of Economic and Financial Analysis, a property tax levy would need an initial rate in 2025 of 11.5 cents per 1,000 assessed value in order to generate $1 billion over 9 years, or an initial levy rate of 18.5 cents per 1,000 to generate $1 billion over 6 years. based on Redfin's King County median home sale of $800,000. An average property owner could pay $92 per year if a 9-year levy is considered, or $158 per year if a 6-year levy is considered. The motion does note, that a proposed levy might not be used to generate the full $1 billion. Yeah, that's great. And they make it sound minimal. They try to minimalize it by saying that it would only be like $92 to $148 extra per household. You can't trust that. It'll be more. It's always more. And that's a bill. $148, that's a bill for a lot of people. That's one less utility that's one more utility rather that they're going to have an issue paying. And the wording again, reduction efforts and response to climate impacts, and they keep mentioning that down here. Open space acquisition in response to climate impacts. What does that mean? How are you going to spend that $1 billion? Advertising? Because usually that's what ends up happening. Oh, are you going to spend it on an advertising campaign? Pay yourselves to talk to people about it? Maybe you're going to waste it on committees to decide what to do with the money. There's never, whenever a proposal like this comes up, they never have a solid solution or a solid explanation as to how the money's going to be spent. Never. As we get back to some of these comments, Chris says France and UK gun laws work so well that now instead of shooting someone, they behead them. Exactly. It's more efficient. Bo Kane says King County is in Seattle. And Gary says that as well. There we go. JD says most practical way of reducing greenhouse emissions is to replace coal power plants with nuclear ones, and they don't have to raise taxes to pay for that. And Chris says most people can barely afford groceries, rent, car, etc. Yeah, I know, but they want to raise your property taxes. They want to run you out of your home. They want your home to be foreclosed on, or they want you to not be able to pay your property taxes on it so they can seize it and sell it in a sheriff's sale. Urban says in British Columbia, they're looking to crack down on condo buildings so they have too many Airbnbs. This will destroy those who have invested in such businesses. In the end, they'll just make an extra tax for them. Gary says increased toll roads in Washington state is coming. And that's another scam too, because the toll money is supposed to go to road repairs, and somehow the money never gets there. Seen a lot of that in Illinois, because the highway commission is always broke. And again, that's when they borrowed the highway money. There was no money for the highway, so they borrowed it from the lottery, and the lottery couldn't pay their winners, and then they got suspended, and that was a few years back. But that's what happens. The warden says, I used to be stationed in Washington, so to translate, we're about to tax your ass some more just because. Basically, Urban says, on the other hand, actual condo owners who want to live peacefully want all the Airbnbs out of the building. So there you go. But yeah, this is just another excuse to raise the taxes. Like I was saying, God, was it like 87% or more of the property taxes that we're paying, for example, are going to public schools from our property. And the public schools in Georgia are some of the worst in the country. And I don't even have a kid in public school. Why do I have to pay that? Why do I have to pay for your failure? And that's what they're going to do. They're going to take this money from these people. They're going to waste it on committees. They're going to reallocate it to something else where it doesn't belong. They're going to pay for advertising. It's kind of like the charity scam. Whenever you see a charity that says awareness, it's a scam. I don't care what it is, even breast cancer awareness. Who doesn't know there's such a thing as breast cancer? Breast cancer awareness programs pay themselves to tell you about breast cancer through advertising. Anytime a charity says awareness, that's what they're doing. They're paying themselves to advertise back to you something you already know. So what are they going to do with that money? I really want to know. Preparedness is, yeah, we pay road tax here a lot, renamed to emission charges, yet our roads are full of potholes. And Chris says here in Nebraska, the school tax the farmers to death via property tax. I'm sure they do. It's outrageous. And they're huge money pits, and they are failure systems. And all they do is beg for more, beg for more, beg for more. And I'll take a moment here to remind everybody that this is Coffee Talk. This is Coffee Talk, or at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube if you wanted to join the conversational portion of this, as well as Prepper University on YouTube, or at Coffee Talk Chat on X, formerly known as Twitter, or Fistful of Radio. And I've got this sticker here that I always hold up, fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting where? Out of Atlanta, Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Friday at noon. And with that, I will go ahead and wrap things up. So thank you, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. Hope you got something out of the conversation. And as always, we will be doing this again tomorrow. So hopefully you can join us tomorrow.